Hi, I've been here for the last 5 minutes talking to myself because I didn't press the go live button. Ta-da! So anyway, let me restart all of this over again. Hold on just a second. Okay, let's do this over again. All right, welcome to the What's Up webcast. My name is Kevin. We take a look at everything that's what's up in the nighttime sky, to equipment, to helpful tips and tricks. And at the end of the month, we have a special guest on to talk about their specialty in the field of astronomy. I just said that 5 minutes ago. I didn't press the go live button. And now we're doing it all over again. So today we're talking about evaluating imaging refractors. So obviously today we're talking about astrophotography and what to look for in a refractor for that. I will be perfectly upfront with everyone that clearly Skywatcher has a vested interest in this topic. We sell a few different lines of refractors. We'd like you to buy our telescopes, but there's a ton of awesome manufacturers out there that make good stuff. So we're just being completely upfront and transparent about that. But everything I'm presenting to you today is simply based on just data analysis. So you are welcome to spend your money in any way, shape, or form that you like. But we're just being transparent, as we always are here. If you like what you see here, please go ahead and subscribe. Leave a like on a video. We have found that over half of you are not subscribed to the channel. So if you could go over and hit subscribe to the channel, that would be great. It just lets us know we're doing a good job. It helps the numbers go up, and it lets us keep doing this. And we share it with upper management and telling them that, yeah, we need to do more of this. So, but if you like what you see here, please leave a like on the video. Please subscribe to the channel. It does help us out. And yeah, and should be a good time. If you want to support the channel every more, go over to skywatcher.threadless.com. You can pick up some cool swag that'll match up with your Skywatcher gear. Got all kinds of fun stuff, and we're always adding fun little things in there. But you can go over there, check it out. And yeah, today is the last live episode from this room. Next week, we are moving everything. I am letting you also know that next week's episode is pre-recorded just because we need all hands on deck to be moving some stuff. So this is the last episode in this little office here. And then 2 weeks from now, we will continue on with our live episodes in a brand new studio setup, which should change over time, but it should be kind of cool. All right, so let's start with evaluating imaging refractors. So when we're talking about refractors, there's a lot of reasons that many of us like refractors, but let's talk about the characteristics of these instruments. So why would you want a refractor? If we look across the imaging planes right now, the most popular design for astrophotography is a refractor. Why? Well, there's a lot of good reasons for a refractor when you're doing imaging. Number one, which I don't even have documented here. Let me backtrack here. Refractors are incredibly low maintenance instruments. You rarely have to collimate one of these, especially if they're designed right. You don't have to collimate them too much, if at all. Cleaning is just general maintenance with a telescope. Maybe you clean the front lens. Maybe you clean the back of, very little effort needs to go into maintaining a refractor. So for imaging, it works really well. They don't have any particular kind of secondary, so you're not losing, any light to scatter. There's no diffraction spikes. Some people like them, some people don't. I like them, but refractors don't have that. But then we get into kind of the unique characteristics of a refractor. Another thing I would mention is a lot of the modern day refractors are particularly well matched for the small pixel cameras that are out nowadays as well. So the focal lengths that are available in the general refractor format fit really well with a lot of the modern sensors like the 533, the 294, the 571, the 455, all those CMOS chips. They all use these smaller pixels, and generally the focal lengths found in refractors match up really well with that. So, but what are some characteristics unique to the refractor? Number one, when you're looking for a refractor for imaging, you want good color correction. So in today's talk, you're going to find that we're not talking about achromats. Achromatic refractors are not generally a good tool for astrophotography. However, you could probably use one, but you have to refocus for every color, and they're probably better suited for narrowband imaging. But a nice achromatic refractor, if you're just doing H-alpha work, like imaging H-alpha, should probably work just fine because you're only looking at a single wavelength of light. Maybe we'll do an episode about imaging with an achromat. That could be kind of interesting. But for today's talk, we're talking about just apo refractors. So there's two major types. There's achromats and apochromats. And we have an episode that covers refractor design, so you can go over there and check that out if you want to know more about those two. But we're talking about apochromatics today, or apos. So number one, you're looking for a telescope that has good color correction. Number two, you want something that's going to provide a flat field. You want something that's low maintenance. And generally, a lot of the modern day refractors are going to be able to produce those characteristics for you. Some are going to be better in certain areas than others. It just depends on what exactly you're looking for. Refractor that's going to have a faster F ratio is going to be a little bit more extreme with field curvature, so you are going to need a good field flattener to get it to flatten out on your imaging sensor. Good color correction can vary depending on what glass is used. What's the F ratio? What's the aperture? There's a lot of different characteristics that need to go into producing an overall well-rounded telescope. Now, a thing I am really particular about when I'm looking at a telescope is future proof. I don't want a telescope that I'm going to outgrow in 6 months or a year. And because you spend a lot of money on these instruments, you want to make sure that they're going to be able to grow with you and not something that you're going to grow out of soon. So that's something I would approach any purchase of anything, no matter what the hobby is, but particularly in astronomy, because it's the one I know the most about, is you want an instrument that will support the growth in the hobby. So as you advance, you can advance into your system. So I always try to recommend buying stuff that's maybe a little bit on the upper level of your knowledge base, because in 6 months to a year, it'll be very comfortable for you to work with, even more so. And you'll probably be happier that you made that initial investment. Let's see, what's the question? What is the line that is crossed to become an apo? What is the test? Most apo refractors use an ED, or extra low dispersion element, in their lens assembly somewhere. If it's a doublet, actually, we're about to get into this, actually, so we'll talk to that in a minute. So future proof allows growth for you to grow into the instrument. It might also, something particularly if you're really into astrophotography, and particularly for today, you want a telescope that's going to allow you to grow sensors as well. So if you're looking for a modern day refractor, you want to check out what the image circle is going to be. How big of a sensor can this telescope illuminate? Because maybe you're using something small. Maybe you're using like a 533 based camera right now. Little 1-inch square sensor. Very popular, very affordable camera. But maybe you want to move up to a 571 or even a full frame. You want to make sure you have a telescope that is supportive of that growth. Yeah, Nico's in the chat today. Nico knows all about refractors. He just released a video on the ASCAR 185, which I have full intention of watching right after this is over, because I'm really curious to see what he thinks about it. You also want to make sure that you know the back focus of your instrument. Usually if you're imaging, you're going to be using some kind of focal reducer or flattener or some kind of corrective optic that attaches to the back of the telescope. Those are going to have the back focus, and that means the distance between the back of the optic to where the image comes to focus how much room do you have? Because the more back focus you have, the more room you've got to put stuff. Filter wheels, your camera, off-axis guiders, whatever crazy stuff you want to deal with. So that's something you want to know as well. Okay, let's talk about everyone's favorite topic when it comes to refractors, glass types. Everybody talks about glass types. So the image I've got right here, this is from our friends at Stellar View. This is their chart for some of the most popular glasses that are used in today's modern refractors as of January 2024. So, if you go online, whether it's social media or forum websites, everyone who owns a refractor is always talking about what glass is in the lens. And if they don't know, they freak out. Well, the main glass that everyone mentions is a glass called FPL 53, which you can see right over here, this column right here. This is the FPL 53 column. These are the super low dispersion glasses, or SD glasses, they have it labeled here. This particular category is the category of glass that provides the highest level of color corrections possible. Now, this in the optical world is known as an Abbey number. The higher the Abbey number, the closer to 100 that Abbey number is, the better the correction is provided at a price. So the four top SD or super low dispersion glasses would be fluorite. Fluorite is the top tier material to use. FPL 53 from O'Hara, FPL 55, and FCD 100. Those are the top four materials that are currently used in telescope lenses. There's other ones out there, but these are the most abundant. Now, there is FPL 52, which you can see there. It's a little lower. I don't even know if they make FPL 52 anymore, and if they do, it's very rarely ever used. The more affordable glass types for the ED line of things is O'Hara's FPL 51. There's also the Hoya FCD1, and then there's CDGM, which is a Chinese company, the FK61 glass, which is a much more cost-effective glass for ED. But you can see there that it doesn't have the color correction that the super low dispersion glass does. So there's a lot of chat about about the glass type, and I want FPL 53. So here's the thing. Fluorite is the best material to use when we're talking straight color correction. However, fluorite is a crystal. You have to grow the crystal. It's very brittle and it's very hard to work with. So it's very expensive. So you don't see a lot of fluorite being used anymore. Tech still uses some fluorite. Takahashi uses fluorite. But a lot of the other companies use what's better known as synthetic fluorite, which is another name for these other super low dispersion glass. What's in here? So would a Petzval quintuplet with Hoya FCD 100 be worth the money upgrading from a standard FPL 53 doublet? I'll get into that in a bit. So talking about glass types, everyone has this attraction to FPL 53. Now, some companies don't advertise the glass. Actually, a lot of companies don't anymore. They're moving away from that model, Skywatcher being one of them. And there's some chat out there saying like, oh, well, you're just hiding things. Well, let me counter the argument of, well, they're just not using FPL 53 anymore. Here is my comment or rebuttal to everyone who's all about FPL 53 glass. FPL 53 is excellent. It's one of the best glass materials available to do color correction with. However, if we were to just stick with that particular glass, there's some limiting factors involved with that. Number one, you cannot get FPL 53 much wider than about 6.5 inches, because when they actually pour the molten glass in sheets, the pour diameter for FPL 53 is probably about 180 millimeters. And some people be like, well, see, you can get a 7-inch out of that. Not really, because you need to be able to, you're looking for glass that is uniform, it's free of bubbles, it's free of stress, and usually the edges are something that gets cut off and removed when you're actually making the round blanks for the lens. So FPL 53 natively only comes in about a 7-inch pore. And then when you think about, okay, I have to cut a blank out of that, then it reduces it to something about 6.5 inches wide or smaller. So if we're to just, and then on top of that, technology is always advancing. You're getting glass that's easier to work with. You're getting glass that has the same color correction or better, but with different characteristics. And that's glass like FPL 55 and FCD 100 have come on to come into the design capability for refractors after FPL 53. So some advantages of using the newer glass is you can get it in a wider diameter, which now means, and you are starting to see it, this is why you're starting to see more 7-inch refractors come onto the market from Stellar View, from Kunming United, and then other brands. Ascar's got their 185, but they're not using the super low dispersion glass. And I can tell you exactly why they're not using super low dispersion glass. And you can tell right off the bat is because of the money that it costs to buy one. A 185 Ascar costs $5,000. There's a pretty good chance they're using FK61 from CDGM. Probably because that's probably the cheapest ED glass that you can get that would make a decent telescope. It's not super low dispersion. And you can start to see some color when you're using lesser glass has less correction capabilities. You can still make an acceptable telescope in a triplet or multi-element design, but the glass type can help. You can still get away with it, but the higher quality glass makes things a little bit easier from a design perspective. So some of the top companies in the world are using FPL 53, 55, and FCD 100. And then there's still FPL 51, 61. And it's not that the telescope is bad, but the SD or super low dispersion glasses are going to give you more capabilities. And if we break away from FPL 53 and can work with 55 or FCD 100, now we can make bigger refractors. So we need to get away from it has to be FPL 53. No, it doesn't. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So that's the glass type. So don't get hung up on the glass type. A lot of the companies that are producing telescopes nowadays are doing so with a good level of quality because they know that us as customers demand that quality. So it doesn't make sense for a company to release lesser quality products because if they do, it won't take very long for the general public to basically rip the product apart and then your name goes downhill. So there's nothing in it from a manufacturer's perspective that would benefit us by using or releasing something that is not of quality. And pretty much all the companies on the market are doing so at some level. So let's talk about some common designs that are in the refractor world. Obviously, there are different ones than this, but here's just my little chart. Now, designs can vary depending on the company, like where they want to place the ED glass element, how many are used. There's a lot of different combos. These are just kind of the basic ones that are out. So number one, the most basic form of aporefractor is the ED doublet. Now, most ED doublets that are on the market, they use the crown or just a standard piece of glass, also known as the crown element, up front with the ED glass in the back. Our Evo Star series, that's how they're built. Some of the Takahashis are done this way. There's a series of Takahashi refractors where the fluorite element is the front element. I'm not sure exactly which version it is, but those do exist. Hold on real quick. So would a Petzval quintuplet with Hoya FCD 100 be worth the money upgrading from a doublet FPL 53 with a flattener, making it a triplet? Number one, a doublet with a flattener is not a triplet. Most flatteners are 2 to 3 elements. So there's more to it than just a single piece of glass. It depends on there's a lot of factors into that. So if we're taking 2 telescopes that are, let's say they're the same size, focal length, and f-stop, one's a Petzval, one's a doublet, I don't really know that you would really see much of a difference if it's done right. Now, so let's say we have a 100 millimeter f7 quad and we have a 100 millimeter f7 doublet with a flattener. Other than like the convenience of having everything built in with the quad or the Petzval, it's more convenient and you might get a little larger image circle, but I don't know that it would really show you much difference, but there's a few variables in there. Let's see, next question. Most filters, IR, UV, IR, use shot BK7. Why is the better super low dispersion glass not used in filters? You don't need color correction in filters. You just need a good glass that will handle the coating. It's really expensive. Like the ED glass is 10 times the cost of the basic crown elements. That's why they're super expensive. That's why some companies are choosing to kind of use the lower quality, I wouldn't say lower quality, the lower corrective glasses like FK61 and FPL51. It's cheaper and you can still make a decent telescope out of it, but you need to make the focal length longer, because by making the focal length longer and using ED glass, you get better color correction. But the filters don't need to be made out of any fancy glass. They just need to be polished really accurately and have good coatings that are going to prevent any halos or reflections. I'm sure you could make a filter out of ED glass, but most of the color correction should be being done in the main optic, not the filter. My SVX 102 has a center element of FPL 53. The other two are not mentioned. What do you think they are? They're probably like a BK7 shot, which is very common. And then there's other variants of that. But in order to make a good refractor lens, the ED element has to be mated and matched to other glasses to give you the complete color correction capability of the refractor. You can't just slap a bunch of FPL 53 lenses together. You could, and it would cost a fortune. There's no need to really have that unless there's something particular about that design that it's going to give it to you. But it's probably like a BK7 shot or something similar. How do you feel about the new Pleiades 111.7 element? I feel like it's 14% light fall off just from the quantity of glass. Whoops, this goes on for a while. Glass is too much. I got to play with a Pleiades 68 for a little while. It's a really cool telescope. The 111 I haven't gotten my hands on. The Pleiades... Oh, my head's gone. Whoops. My camera time's out. Oh, there we go. All kinds of issues this morning. Hot mess. The Pleiades is a really cool telescope series from William Optics. My question is, A, are they going to keep them in production or are they just a limited run? I actually like William Optics stuff quite a bit, and I really commend them for thinking out of the box, particularly with the Pleiades. The Pleiades series is very impressive. It's only for imaging. I'd love to try the 111, but the 68 is pretty awesome. It's a bit spendy though. It's like $2,000 for one of them. So I think it's a really cool telescope. If you're into imaging, it's probably pretty sweet. If you mated it with like a little tiny strain wave mount, it's a nice little combo, especially if you shoot full frame and you want a big chunk of the field of view. But as you add more glass, things get more complicated. But the color correction on the Pleiades was pretty nice. We also, let's see. I believe Stellar View uses lanthanum for the rear triplet element. It's going to change from design to design. Every company is going to use a slightly different combo of glass there are a lot of companies that are using lanthanum glass now as well. So it just depends on the company. So ED doublets really quick. ED doublets are a great budget option. They get you into the APO world. Some of them have better color correction than others. They don't scale very well because as a doublet grows in size, the focal length also needs to be considered. The focal ratio of a telescope on a refractor is part of the color correcting capabilities. The longer the focal length, the less steep the cone of light actually is at the focus point, and it's easier to focus all the colors together. That's why these old achromat refractors are really long focal lengths, like all the Alvin Clark refractors. They were very long focus refractors. That's to help with that color correction capability because of that long focal length. So a doublet's kind of a hybrid where it uses that long focal length to help with the color correction, but the ED glass actually helps correct more of that. But again, we make 150 millimeter f8. That's what you can see here, the EvoStar 150. They're fairly well corrected for their size, and the nice thing is they're really lightweight for their size, but they're big, and they have to be big in order to make, like, we can't make an f7 or an f6 ED doublet and have good color correction on them. Then it's just a semi-apo and it's not worth it. But doublets are really nice, but generally you won't find them much bigger than 6-inch. But I have plenty of friends who are using this telescope for imaging. I've used it for imaging. It does a nice job. And there's a lot of doublets, particularly like the Takahashi doublets are excellent. And there's some more cost-effective small aperture doublets that can get away with quite a bit because they're smaller. But doublets don't scale well because as you go up, the focal length gets a lot longer. So, and you're going to need some kind of corrector at the back, like a field flattener or reducer. Next up is the ED triplet design. Obviously, these are everywhere. There's manufacturers that make them in all different formats. What glass is used varies from the design. So, here at Skywatcher, we have our Esprit triplets. Stellar View makes triplets. Tech, Astrophysics, SV Boney, Ascar, Explore Scientific. Triplets are everywhere. And triplets have gotten a lot easier to make. So, obviously, the demand is around there. These are generally higher corrected systems than a doublet because it has that third piece of glass in the objective. That helps with the color correction quite a bit. You can also make a triplet in a wider range of sizes because it has that extra color correction capability. So you can keep the F ratio more manageable, like f7 rather than f8 or f9 or something crazy. So that's why you see a lot of 6-inch APOs are around f7. And as you get smaller, like 120s, 130s, 100s, you can speed them up quite a bit because you can get away with a lot when you use that third piece of glass in there to help with the color correction. These generally are also going to need a flattener or reducer in order to get you those pinpoint stars to the edge. And as the speed picks up, like you have some of these fast refractors, like I have a Stellar View SVX 90. It's f6. It's a fast little telescope, and it needs a flattener to get that really nice imaging plane for it, but you trade off with speed. Let's see, Pleiades 111 versus the Sharpstar Z4. Pleiades all day long. I haven't even used the Pleiades yet, 111 yet, but the William Optics has been doing this for a long time, 20-something years probably, and I trust what their designs are. But they're probably spendy, but it depends on what you want to do. But I've been very impressed with the Pleiades as well. Can we talk about visual as well? This is an imaging episode. I'm sorry. I think we did a refractor episode for visual if you need to go back and watch it. Now, this is a really small subsection of refractors. This is the dual ED triplet. There's not a lot of them out there. There's a couple different reasons that manufacturers can do dual ED elements. Sometimes you're using lesser quality glass like FK61 or FPL51. And in order to get some of that correction in the spot size, so how tight the light gets focused down, you can use more ED glass elements to kind of get there. You can do a perfectly good telescope with an ED triplet design and not need any additional ED glass. Or you could step down and you then have to use another ED element if needed on some of the more cost-effective where they're the dual ED refractors. You shouldn't have to use dual ED unless there's something very specific about the design that requires it. Now, one of the most popular dual ED and one of the most respected dual ED triplets on the market is the TOA Ortho 130 and 150s. These use two FPL53 lenses inside of them. These are top-notch, world-class refractors, are the TOA, Takahashi TOAs. They're one of the few on the market that are using the dual ED on a very high level. And that's because they're trying to get correction beyond the visible spectrum. So there's a reason they're using some of this stuff. Where other companies that are more budget friendly, sometimes I feel like it's more of a marketing thing where it stands out, or it allows them to kind of make a compromise and get around having to use higher level glass. You still have to pay for it, but where no expense is spared on the high level, it'd be the Takahashi TOA series, the 130 and the 150s. Those are absolute monster refractors, and they are dual ED triplets for a very good reason, because a lot of the Takahashi stuff is corrected beyond the 400 to 700 nanometer spectrum. So there's advantages of using that design. And more cost-effective telescopes, there's probably also a reason, and it's probably because you're compromising on something. You shouldn't need to do two ED elements when we're talking a triplet unless there's a very specific reason. The Takahashi stuff, I would give a very specific reason. Anything beyond those, you're probably not gaining much, but you're spending more. On these, it's just like a regular triplet. You're going to need a flattener or reducer. If you're shooting narrowband, can you get away with less correction? Yeah, because you're isolating different wavelengths of light at that point, and you're refocusing. So you could use an achromat probably to do narrowband imaging. You don't need much fancy stuff because you're refocusing. That's something I actually intend on trying here soon. Next up is the quad. The quad is a Petzval design where there's objective and then there's lenses in the back. Now underneath the quad or the Petzval design, you break off into the quintuplet design or sextuplets, and then you get into like the Pleiades from William Optics. There's a lot of different things that spin off in the Petzval design. Now the Petzval design is quite broad. There's a lot of Petzvals on the market nowadays, and they're actually quite effective instruments. Petzvals are really nice because most of their intention is the ability to have a flat, highly corrected field for imaging without the need of any additional optics. So it's all built in. That's one of the really nice things about Petzvals. Some of the top quality Petzvals would be like the Teleview NP series, like the 101 IS, 127 IS, Takahashi's FSQ85, FSQ 106, all of that. Those are some of the big ones. But the trade-off with this, because as you add more glass, there is the ability that you're going to add more scatter. But where these come in handy is they're all just built together with everything internalized. So you don't have to have a flattener. And a lot of times with a Petzval, you're able to make a much larger image circle. right here, this is our friend Ron Brecher, an amazing astrophotographer. This is his FSQ 106. I don't know what gen it is, but the FSQ 106 is probably the top-notch quad or Petzval on the market for imaging, and it has a monster image circle. It can handle some of the largest sensors out there, but again, you pay for it. Now, there are more cost-effective quads that have come on the market. Some of them are actually quite good. But the one limitation I would say on the Petzval design is they don't scale well. And we're starting to see that some of these larger Petzvals are coming onto the market. Like there's 130 millimeter and 151 millimeter quads out there. And we don't see them scaling too well because as the glass gets bigger, there's more weight. And as you have more weight and more mass, it's harder to keep those optics aligned. And I would be surprised if these larger quads that are on the market now are actually able to hold collimation over time. And you'll start to see it quite a bit. But those are the four major types. So we have doublet, triplet, dual ED triplet, and then quad, and then breaking off into the Petzval designs. Petzvals are very nice. If you're an imager, a Petzval is a nice thing to have because usually it's a turnkey system. Again, there's a lot of small ones out there, probably 100 millimeter and smaller, that are very capable instruments. But some of even the bigger companies have made Petzval designs 100, 120, 130, and you don't see them. And that's because as they get bigger, they do not hold collimation very well. Because as the element gets bigger, it's harder to keep all that glass aligned. And there's probably other various reasons why they don't exist either. But on a large format, if you're talking aperture, probably the best design for a large aperture refractor is just an ED triplet with a matched corrector on the back. If you're talking big, and when I mean big, we're probably 130 or larger, is probably best suited just being a standard triplet design and a corrector. Quads I would keep under 100 millimeter, just simply because it's a lot easier to keep the glass all together and aligned. So you want to go buy a refractor for imaging. What do you need to consider? Well, number one, everyone's talking about color correction. You don't want halos around your stars. So you can see on the left, there is color fringe, and on the right, there is none. So the difference here is there are two different refractors. They're two different 6-inch refractors. One's a doublet, one's a triplet. Now, one-shot color cameras that are very popular nowadays are able to pick up a lot of that color fringing because they're accepting all three colors of light, red, green, blue, at the same time. Now, if you're doing monochrome imaging, LRGB, you'll probably find you're going to refocus for most of your colors. RGB, you will refocus. So monochrome imaging actually allows you to probably get away with a little bit more because you're probably going to refocus for each color. And you could get away with I don't want to say lesser quality, but a scope that has less correctional capabilities. You could get away with more on a monochrome sensor where color is going to pick it up quite a bit. Now, that brings in the argument of post-processing. There's a lot of AI technology that's coming out now for PixInsight and Photoshop that allows you to correct an awful lot of stuff. I would not be surprised over the next 5 to 10 years if the processing capabilities of people gets more and more capable of correcting optical issues. So you rely less on the optics and more on the software and post-process. I always think you should do as much in the telescope and camera as you can, making processing easier. Don't have post-processing be your secret weapon to get around optics that just don't meet the level that you need. So color correction is important. This is where achromats, ED doublets, And there's even triplets on the market that use lesser glass types that do not have as good of color correction. This is what you pay for. Yeah, there are budget alternative options out there in a bunch of different sizes now. Your camera's probably going to pick up some color, but that's what you pay for, and that's the compromise that you make. Where if you want to go get yourself one of these scopes, it works out just fine. It just someone's like garbage in, garbage out. Exactly. You're going to get what you pay for. So if you're trying to do this on a budget, you're going to go get yourself a big APO refractor, and you're on a budget, and I want the biggest thing possible for the cheapest price, you're going to pay for it. Or you could stick with something a little bit smaller that's higher level, and it'll probably give you better execution. But you can see here, there's a lot of blue fringing out there. That's why you buy a refractor, to not have blue fringing. Or you get a triplet, and you get some really nice color correction there as well. Flat field. This is the name of the game in imaging nowadays, especially as sensors are getting bigger and more affordable. You want a telescope that has a highly corrected field. Just because this is what I had on hand. This is an Esprit 150 flat with the field flattener installed. Obviously, it's not 100% perfect, but it is very acceptable. And I've seen better as well. Now, flattening a field can also have distortions from spacing. If you don't have the spacing right, that can throw it off. If there's some flexure, that can throw it off. But this is actually pretty good right here. This is also a full frame sensor. So if we actually drop this down to a crop sensor, it'd be even better. But you want to make sure that your telescope has a decently flat field of view. That way your stars at the center and the stars on the edge all look like nice little pinpoints, and they're not flared out at the edge. Now, this is easy to do with a good quality telescope and a triplet design and a flattener. It's pretty easy to do. Now, the quads and the Petzval designs out there build all of that inside, and it takes away that back focus measurement to where you don't have to have all these adapters stacked. You just need a few spacers that hopefully the company includes to get you to where the focus point actually is. But there's no like additional optics you have to put onto it. So this is a pretty decent flat field here. And full frame cameras really push the limits of some of these optics as well. Full frame is pretty hard to get when you have such a big sensor. Now, in the real world, this is kind of where we start to evaluate what we expect out of our optics. Because obviously, when we run through things through like the evaluation softwares that I was showing you there for the flat field, it looks like it's blown out of proportion. And in a way that actually is. Here is an example right here. This is a test frame, full frame camera, a one-shot color. This is using a really popular 151 f7 that's available right now. This is a test shot, single sub test shot, doing that full frame. It looks okay, but the stars at the edge of the field are not ideal. Now, if you're just starting out, or maybe you're on a budget, you're willing to look over some of these compromises. There's nothing wrong with that. I understand what it's like to be on a budget and not being able to go get to the tier that you want to get. But going bigger isn't always the way that you want to go. Try to get the highest quality you can in the budget that you can swing. And bigger's not always better. So after testing this, evaluating it, it looks okay. But if we actually, because this scope is actually promoted to be flat. It's a flat field instrument because it's a quad. So it looks okay, but when we put it through the image analysis, you have a 73% image curvature on this thing. And this starts to show up in your images. This much curvature becomes a problem. And on a crop sensor, that's fine, but eventually a lot of you will probably end up putting a reducer on it and opening up that field even more, or you're gonna want to go to full frame or bigger sensors, And this is what I talk about future-proofing stuff, is you want a system that is going to allow you to operate at the level that you want. And as you get higher and higher into your experience, you expect more and more from your system. So you want to be careful about stuff out there that does not meet what you need it to do. And having a flat field is important in the field of imaging. So you're going to, on this particular instrument here, it says it's flat, put a full frame camera on it. It's not. And your stars at the edge aren't pinpoint. And if you start to blow it up, or if you start to put prints, large prints out there, the stars at the edge are not going to be pinpoint. That's what you paid for. So it's important that you pay attention to what the capabilities of some of that is. What software is used for this analysis? This is... What is this one? I always forget. Let's see. I talk about it all the time too, and now I can't remember it, and I'm trying to find it on the desktop here. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. It was right at the top of my head too, and went away. So you can do stuff like this in PixInsight with under image analysis. You do want to make sure that you're paying attention to how you run this the software here. For the life of me, CCD inspector. Thank you, Nico. Could not for the life of me figure out what it was. Yeah, this is CCD inspector. It's a nice software, but you really want to make sure that you're using it right, because it can also produce bad stuff. So, but yeah, so. But if you're getting a telescope, you want to make sure that it's going to produce what you paid for it to do. So this right here is a tremendous amount of field curvature. Like, it's a lot. So, and there's obviously a window of how flat a telescope needs to be. A lot of that's going to be like your image scale and, you know, what your pixels can resolve. There's a lot of people out there that worry that, like, oh my goodness, I'm not guiding at 1 arc second, when they're using like a 70 or 80 millimeter refractor and you can't even resolve 1 arc second. So there's a lot of issues, particularly when we're talking small refractors, that you can kind of sweep under the rug simply because the system does not have the resolving power to see the error. But as we get bigger, it quickly scales to where those become much more noticeable. That's why at Skywatcher we test everything with a 455 camera, because the pixels are tiny and it's a big chip. It leaves very little left to hide when you're using high resolution sensors and big chips. So that's something that's why we use that large of a sensor, so we can see what's going on. And right here is something's going on. Mount options. So when we're talking big refractors, this is something that was brought up with like the ASCAR 185 that just came out recently. Obviously, this is my Stellar View 180. There's a lot of 7-inch refractors coming out on the market. And having owned this and an old Meade 178, which was huge, one of the biggest problems about refractors is refractors do not scale well. And when you do scale them, you need to be very aware that the mount needs to also follow suit. And that doesn't just mean the mount can hold the weight of your system. It's like, oh, my telescope is 40 pounds fully loaded. I'll get an EQ6. How long is that refractor? An EQ6 or something similar can hold that quite a bit. But if it's a big telescope and a particularly big refractor and it's 4 or 5 feet long, you need to take into the consideration that the moment arm, how much torque it takes to move that tube, is something that you have to consider. So when we're talking about these 5, 6, 7-inch refractors that are on the market nowadays, you need to make sure you have a mount that's going to support that accurately and sturdy. And also, as they get longer, they need to sit higher up. We were out last night with the 180 that you see here. I have mine on an EQAR, and it's raised quite a bit. And honestly, we were still on the ground when looking up at zenith. So I could go another foot higher, and it would have made it a little bit more comfortable. But these big refractors coming on the market, you need to take into consideration that, number one, you're going to need a mount heavy enough to really hold it well. And usually that means going up 2 levels of mounts to hold it. So it's like, hey, I want an EQ6R, or I have an EQ6R. What should I consider? I see a lot of people getting EQ6R, and they're putting larger than they need to telescopes on it. The EQ6R is probably best suited for a fully loaded, probably up to about 120 or 130 millimeter refractor is what an EQ6R, like a CGEM 2, something in that 40-pound capable environment is probably best for like a 5-inch or smaller refractor. And I know some people are like, well, it holds all this weight. It does hold all that weight, but you don't want to max the mount out, and you don't want to add this long tube because you have to consider the moment arm and how much force it's going to take to move that tube. Moving further up, when we're talking 6-inch refractors, like, Stellar View 152, Esprit 150s, ASCAR 130 PHQs, 151 PHQ, all those, you're probably wanting something that's really more in the 70-pound payload in arena. So CQ350s, Ioptron's got a few different ones in there. Paramount Mighties, you're starting to ratchet up in those mounts because you really need to do like 2 steps up, is how I would recommend buying it, mount for a refractor. And then when we start talking big ones like the 180 or even bigger 200s, a 200, like a 7 or 8-inch refractor, honestly, having owned 7-inch refractors, they're right on the cusp of what most people are going to want to lug around in the field. An 8-inch refractor is just getting bigger. And now you have to have a mount that's way the heck up there if you want to look through it. And it needs to be big. The EQAR handles a 180 f7 refractor without much effort. You can image with it, no problem. But the telescope weighs 45 pounds. You're probably, if you're getting a 7-inch and you want to image with it, you're probably going to want something that holds about 100 pounds. So AP900, EQAR, AP1100, Los Monte Titans. These are getting big mounts. So, or bigger. So it just depends on what you want to do with it. But that's something that you need to consider as it goes up, is don't just get a mount that holds the weight of the system. You need a mount that's going to hold the weight, but it's also going to be rigid with that long tube on it. So you want to sit probably one level higher than you think you're going to need when buying a mount for a refractor. So anyway, that's kind of it for today's episode. We kind of finished about right on time, even though we started a little bit late. If you guys have any questions, now would be the time to throw it in there. Please, if you like what you see here, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It makes a big difference for us. And like I said, we know about half of you are not subscribed to the channel. It does make a difference, and it lets us know we're doing a good job. So please go ahead and subscribe. If you have an idea for an episode, email us at info@skywatchusa.com. Title it What's Up. Let's see. The GTI handles my Z73 like a champ, but it's right on the 10-pound limit. I'm pushing the GTI too. If you can get it to balance, your mount is probably okay. It's not so much the fact that you're going to hurt something. It's just you're going to be way more susceptible. Let me back up there. if you have a mount that is pushed all the way to its limits, its listed limits of the payload, it's not so much that you're going to break something. You could. Arm mounts, you're probably okay. Most mounts, I wouldn't worry too much about it either. The biggest issue that you're going to have here is you're going to start running into rigidity problems. So if you're walking around, if there's a breeze, all of those factors are going to come into play if your mount is fully loaded. Because if your mount is maxed out, it's going to have a harder time dampening any of the jumps going around. So that's why these telescopes, these big refractors, you need to go bigger because they're also longer. They catch more wind or a breeze. They are more prone to shake. So you need to go, like I said, 2 levels up from the mount you think you're going to need. Go 1 higher. So if you're buying, for example, if you're buying an Esprit 100, an Esprit 100 weighs about 16-ish pounds. You could probably put that on an HEQ5, no problem. It would be better suited on an EQ6R. If you're buying a 130, sure, it could fit on an EQ6R. It'd probably be okay. You'd probably be better suited going with a CQ350, a Losmandy G11, something like that. 1 level higher. That's going to get harder and more expensive as the telescope gets bigger. So, but yeah. All right, everyone, that's pretty much it. Like I said, today was imaging refractor evaluations. Some of my top picks for refractors, if they're doublets, all of our Evo stars are really nice. I like those. Astronomics under Astrotech makes some really good doublets. There's a lot of rebranded stuff out there from like Kunming and stuff. It's the same telescope. It's just offered by different companies. There's quite a few of them out there. Triplets, they're all over the place. There's some good ones out there. Anything from Stellar View, Tech, Takahashi is phenomenal. Of course, you have Astrophysics, which is up there. The Esprits are nice. If you're going to explore scientific, the FCD 100s are excellent. So there's a lot of good options out there. If we're talking quads, you can never go wrong with like the FSQ series from Takahashi, the 85 and the 106. You're going to pay for it. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there. And, you know, there's something for every budget. But do remember that when you're spending money, particularly on big refractors, there's a compromise hiding in there somewhere if it's cheaper. So just don't know what it is. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for today. Next week, we're doing the State of Skywatcher. It's our 25th anniversary, so next week we're going to have Jeff and Jared. They're part of our upper management team. You want to do that? We'll be on next week. It is a pre-recorded episode, but we will have people in the chat to answer questions, or you can always email us. But yeah, real quick, just because it came up somewhere, there's a lot of China Direct stuff coming out on the market nowadays. And the problem with some of this stuff is it's not the fact that it's bad, but you really don't know what you're going to get. And there's probably very little customer support that you're going to get if there is an issue. So I would always recommend buying from a brand that is known and it has support. And if you need to get something replaced or repaired, that they have some place that you can contact or go to. But there's a lot of this direct stuff coming out on Amazon that it's affordable, but if you ever need assistance, there's not much behind it to help you if something goes wrong or if there's an issue. So keep in mind with that too. That just popped up here. So, but yeah, next week we're talking about the State of Skywatcher. We'll have the upper management team hanging out with us. It should be kind of cool. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. Please have a good weekend, clear skies, and we will see you guys live in 2 weeks. Next week is recorded, but we'll see you guys back here in 2 weeks for another live episode. But join us next week for our 25th anniversary talk. So thanks very much, everyone. Take care, clear skies, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.